Oh hi! Welcome to Aquata Zoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about authoritarian leaders. I figured I would continue on our little exploration of various different leader types and how to navigate with them, because we all run into different types of leaders, and I'm not saying that someone falls into these categories entirely. There are times and places for different types of leadership styles, but overall, the type that I'm talking about is the ones that kind of fall into this category most often. Like they handle the everyday things in a certain type of way. So whether that's kind of laissez-faire or non-confrontational or micromanager or, in this case, authoritarian. I suppose first we should probably get into what an authoritarian leader kind of looks like or how they act. And this is the type of leader that's sort of my way or the highway type. They are very definitive in what they want and what they expect of you, which, in some cases is good. In a case of an emergency, an authoritarian leader, provided they know what they're doing, is actually a really good, helpful thing to have. When everyone's in a kind of panic, having somebody who can make definitive decisions and keep things moving is the type that you need. So there's a time and place. But when you're dealing with an authoritarian leader on a daily basis, it can get very difficult and tiring. An authoritarian leader is one that kind of feeds off of power and authority, right? That's the kind of thing that they're most protective of, I would say. And I think this style of leadership really stems from a lot of fear. And that might be fear of losing power, fear of what might happen if they are not in power, what someone else might do. A lot of this really kind of assertive, definitive, abrupt, maybe intolerant type of behavior as it pertains to leadership. This all tends to stem from fear of losing the power, fear of losing the prestige that comes with it, the attention of people around you, that sort of thing. They're always waiting for the next thing that an authoritarian leader is going to say because they have to be ready to execute, right? Get those things done the way that leader wants them done, or else, So there's a lot of fear involved. There could also be a lot of baggage, I guess, from upbringing and examples of leadership in that person's life, all as they were learning how to lead. And it could all have been authoritarian leadership. And if you don't have a different example and don't have a different way, there's a lot of leaders in the world and leaders kind of in film and examples that you see around the authoritarian leaders do garner a lot of attention. And so maybe they want that. And so you're looking at somebody who's learning from examples that they see. Maybe they're dramatized, maybe they're not. And then just kind of a fear of being made to look foolish, being made to look, weak, something like that, or like they can't make a decision, indecisive, that's terrible, right? So while a leader with a different type of style that is looking for voices to hear what other people have to say, an authoritarian leader would probably look at that person and think that they're kind of weak or silly for even asking. Just make the decision and go. And it can get you through certain types of situations. I'm not saying it's always a bad thing. It's not. But it is difficult when you are the one, following that leader, or if you're just kind of watching what's happening, because it's tough for the people that are trying to do what the leader is telling them to do. If they don't agree, they can't say anything. Otherwise, the authoritarian leader tends to get, angry or just there's punishment to be had for, dissent and that sort of thing. So this is a tough style to deal with if you're not in a situation that warrants this quick action, definitive type of decision making. I don't think that an authoritarian leader is always coming from a bad place. I think that sometimes the intention is good. When things are chaotic and there aren't a lot of answers and a lot of people in groups, I guess, don't know what to do, an authoritarian leader wants to kind of come across as a savior. I mean, we all do, right? You want to come in there and have the solution and save the situation. But an authoritarian leader really believes that they've got that solution and everything will be good if they if everyone would just do it their way, the way that they have determined is the best way, and they don't want to hear dissent, they don't want to hear opinions about it, they just need to go and execute, make it happen. And that's your kind of definitive authoritarian leader. So I don't think it's coming from a bad place when that happens, right? They're trying to help. They're trying to help in the best way that they can. The challenge is they may not have all the information that they need to make a really good, informed, definitive decision, and they may not understand the consequences of going a certain route or solving things in a certain type of way. So they're just trying to make a decision in the best interests of someone. If it's not them, then it's the group, but not really having all the information makes that really, really difficult. They kind of want to turn it into something very black and white. It could be a very complex problem with lots of different facets and challenges to it, but they want to simplify it and make a decision and have everyone go with it. And a lot of times people are looking for that, especially in a really chaotic, scary, anxiety-ridden situation. They're looking for someone to have an answer. And that's how these types of leaders kind of come to power, because at some point in that organization's history, there was chaos and everyone was looking for someone to step up and be the decision maker. And this person did it. And, they might have had good intentions in mind when they stepped up and made the decisions and started ordering people around and telling them how we were going to fix this problem. It's not that bad. This is black and white. Just do it my way. I can see the solution, right? That's kind of what these authoritarian leaders tend to say. And then people do it, and then, everybody gets this adrenaline rush of, yay, we fixed the problem. And you may not have, but at least somebody made a decision and we're making some kind of progress in some direction. But the authoritarian leader then gets this kind of excitement over, people are listening to me, they're looking up to me, they're getting this attention that they might be craving. They may not even realize it. And then they start making decisions like this in the future for different types of reasons. And, when the decision actually does need to have a little bit of consideration of consequences and how people are viewing this and how it's going to impact the business and the employees and the customers and all that kind of stuff, they start still making those black and white decisions. We're going to do it this way because we need a decision. And so they just kind of get into the routine of making all the decisions based on their viewpoint, based on their experience, based on just what they want to see. And so that's when things get kind of difficult for everyone else around them. So it may have started off as something of a search for a hero, I guess, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? We needed a hero, we needed somebody to step in and make the decisions, right? And you've got this authoritarian leader who stepped in. They're starting to make more decisions in their style that they have determined works, which is the authoritarian style. They're making these decisions, and now anybody who speaks up against them is dissenting. They're not allowed to do that. That's not what I want to hear, therefore keep it to yourself. Then you start bringing in little quote unquote issues like loyalty. So then you're starting to play favorites. So you've got an authoritarian leader who wants to make these decisions, who wants to stay in power and really kind of aggressively is guarding that, right? And so then you've got people who are getting a little concerned, right? The intent originally may have been good about why they stepped up, why they're making the decisions, why they have this power. But now we're trying to make just everyday decisions, not the crisis ones. At that point, the authoritarian leader can turn this into a crisis so that they have to continue making these high-profile decisions and just maintaining their power that way, or they start kind of amassing people around them. And it really becomes a question of loyalty and favoritism. So the people who dissent, the people who speak up, who are concerned about what's going on and, disagreeing with some of these decisions that are being made are then kind of labeled as dissenting or difficult. And the people who gravitate towards that authoritarian leader are kind of rewarded for going along with it and not being a pain, quote unquote. They are then brought in closer to that leader. The leader trusts them a little bit more, so then they become part of the inner circle. And so this is kind of a pattern that you'll see with authoritarian leaders. And there will be favorites, and there will be people who are like kind of outcast. And this is really difficult to deal with in a work environment. Been there, done that. And so it causes a lot of tension, not only between the leader and their team, but between the teammates who are trying to get along and work together, but some are agreeing with the authoritarian leader even though they don't really agree. Like, they're going along with it because it gains them something, rather than the other side who is trying to voice their disagreement or trying to voice their concern and is getting kind of shut out, right? So you've got all these people on the same team and it just causes a lot of friction. So you'll see authoritarian teams, either all of the dissenters have been kicked out entirely, or you've got a group that does not work together, that's kind of pitted against each other kind of naturally, and a leader who wants to pretend that everything is fine. As I'm sure you can imagine, when I have been dealing with an authoritarian type leader in my past, I'm usually on the dissenting side. There are things that I don't agree with. In a pinch, in an emergency situation, that person is the best person to go to, and I've seen that work, and it's been incredible. The authoritarian leaders that I have worked with in an emergency are the absolute best person for that type of environment, for that type of time frame, for that critical situation. It's when they take that, rapid fire, wild decision making on the fly, and where people are being a little bit more forgiving if they make a mistake, just because it's a high intensity time. Everybody's going to make mistakes at some point, right? So as those situations calm down and you're going back into regular everyday situations where you're having to make decisions about just normal things, day-to-day life, and that authoritarian type leader now realizes that they got much more of a response when they did that authoritarian type aggressive, no questions, no concerns voiced, get out of my face if you don't agree kind of decision making. When they take that to the nuanced things that happen day to day, and they're not listening to others, and they don't want to hear anything that disagrees with their opinion about this, because they're kind of concerned that people don't want them to be in power. I think it's, very fear-based. They're afraid of losing their power, and they just don't know how to get around that themselves. So when I've had to deal with this in my past, I'm on the dissenting side most of the time, except for in the emergency situations, and it does not garner me any favors. I'm generally not super liked by authoritarian leaders who, again, it's a style that is in play sometimes, usually. And the leaders who default to this style as more or less their normal type, they don't get along with me very well. Because I will always ask questions. I will always try to figure out what's going on and try to think creatively if I can. I'm not a super creative person, but I like to hear a lot of voices, hear a lot of perspectives, and try to make decisions from there and understand the consequences of these decisions. And authoritarian leaders are not big on that, right? They just want to make the decision and move on. They want to simplify that problem, make the decision, everyone go with it, stop questioning me. But I'm also not going to say that I've never used this style myself. I absolutely have, because there were decisions that needed to be made in the heat of the moment, and we just needed to move, right? Could be a matter of life and death. Could be a matter of, stemming some chaos before it actually blows up into a huge problem, right? Those decisions need to be made quickly. Calls need to be made. People need to go address things. Like, that kind of thing happens in a leader's experience. At some point in their career, you're going to have to default into, I'm just making the best decision that I can with the information that I have right now, and I hope it works, I have done that. I'm not saying that I have never been an authoritarian leader. I absolutely have. And when the situation calls for it, I switch up my style. So, and that's what leaders typically tend to do, provided they understand what type of leadership they need for what type of situation. But that's not my normal style, but I have used it. So now that we've talked a little bit about the types of behaviors that you'll see from an authoritarian leader and maybe why they're that way, it may not be like a bad thing when they initially started it. but it may have evolved into something that's relatively unpleasant for a lot of the people that they're leading because day-to-day decisions are a little bit more nuanced than an authoritarian leader often paints them to be. And one more thing I should mention is that when an authoritarian leader makes a decision and things don't go well as a result of that decision, they are more likely to find blame in someone or something else so that they don't look bad. Because again, this is kind of fear-based. They don't want to look bad. Obviously, nobody wants to look bad when they make a mistake, but blaming other people or blaming situations or things that are outside of their control, sometimes that is the case, but oftentimes it's not, especially if you're making decisions really quickly and definitively without all the information that you need and not bothering to look for that information that you need. So that's something more that you're going to see from an authoritarian leader. So how do we deal with these leaders? They are in our workplaces. It happens. Leaders of all types are around us, right? And so you're going to run into authoritarian leadership, maybe quote unquote, where it doesn't belong. There are situations where it's great and situations where it's not. You're going to run into it where you don't want it to be. So how do we deal with it? One thing that I've noticed in dealing with authoritarian leaders is having to be very careful about how I word things. So if I am about to, voice some dissent or come up with a solution for a problem that has been presented, you I hate to do this, but it is the way to be effective. You kind of frame it as in something that you're trying to protect them, right? You're protecting the team, you're protecting this leader. Or I've also gone to the great trouble of trying to lead a leader along my thought path in solving a problem so that they come up with the idea, quote unquote, on their own. It's kind of ego stroking and whatever, but ultimately I had to learn eventually. It took me a long time to learn this one, but eventually I learned that having the problem solved the way that I felt was like the best way that worked for all parties involved. Again, because I like to find out from other people's perspectives, like what they see, and just try to navigate those challenges, that they see that I didn't see. And so I will come to a leader, an authoritarian leader, with this information, and then we'll have a conversation, and I kind of lead them along the path of thought that I had in coming up with what I thought was the best solution, and just let them come up with it too. So it is kind of their idea. It's kind of ego stroking, but you get what you need, and you just kind of have to swallow the fact that it was kind of your idea and you just kind of gave it to them. But at least they're learning to, at least from you, to try to take more, viewpoints into consideration when they're coming up with these decisions and laying down the law, right? So it's a little manipulative, I know that. But if you want to survive in an environment where your direct leader is really kind of an authoritarian in style, then this is an option. You're trying to portray what you're thinking as a method to protect the organization or to protect them as a leader or to protect your team. And it's what's in it for them, basically. Or, kind of guide them along so that they kind of take the same thought path that you did to get to your idea, basically. So they can see the logic in it and they're more apt to go with it. And so it's not necessarily, it's avoiding the friction of the conversation or the friction of voicing your dissent and kind of placing you in a more trusted type of position rather than a person who is just disagreeing to disagree. You want to make sure that you're trying to make them look good, right? They have a little bit of an ego if they're this type of leader and they're operating this way all the time. So you want to make sure that they look good and they can see that you're trying to make sure that they look good and that you're trying to protect them. You're trying to protect your team and yourself. Like everything, your thoughts and your intent is good. Make it very obvious that that is what's happening. My number one suggestion, though, is document everything. If you have a discussion with them, you come up with a solution and you walk away from that, get to your email, type it all up and summarize it all, send it to them in an email so that they can verify for you what you guys had talked about, right? So you and I discussed it today. We decided that I will do this by Friday, and that's how we will begin moving forward with this issue, right? And so you have it in an email and you send it to them. Technically, even if they don't respond, it's still documentation, but hopefully they will respond and say, yep, that's it. Or they'll say no and they'll try to correct you. And maybe there was some miscommunication, but having it in writing is a great reference so that if the authoritarian leader turns out they made the wrong decision and they're trying to blame you for the issue, then you can go back to your email and say, nope, we agreed that this is how this would work. And so an authoritarian leader sometimes will change the narrative because something went wrong. They don't want to be to blame for it. So they're going to look for someone else to blame or something else to blame. And it may come back at you. And therefore, you have your documentation to say, we were very clear about this when we left this conversation. And this is what we discussed. And you then agreed on it again. I can't tell you how many times that I've had to do that. And while it is unpleasant to do, if I'm going to go down for something, it better be for the right reason. So yes, I've had to go dig back in the email and say, no, this is what we agreed to. You did not mention what you're saying now. And so this is what I had to go off of. That's what I did. You agreed to it. We talked about that. You have to document things pretty thoroughly when you're dealing with an authoritarian leader, because otherwise, if something doesn't go perfectly, or if you are voicing dissent later on, you need to have documentation to prove that you were trying and that you were doing what they were telling you to do, because they may try to change the narrative on you to make you look bad or to make themselves look good or, unblameable in this situation, So it is manipulative on their side as well. So So yeah, I would recommend definitely, if you're dealing with an authoritarian leader on a regular basis, make sure you document your discussions and you have the email chains going back and forth when you're dealing with projects and things like that. When they make a decision that you're not really totally on board with, just make sure everything is documented, because if things don't go well and they try to throw you under the bus, then you have a way out. You have documentation that says you were doing what they told you to do. You agreed that this was going to be what was going to happen, and whatever narrative they might try to bring out later after the fact and whatever blame they're trying to shift is not really going to shake out very well for them. And I know that sounds manipulative, but it's just a way to cover yourself, to make sure that you are protected no matter what that supervisor or that authoritarian leader is doing. You have some protection. Another thing you can do is keep them updated on what you're up to. If they don't see you, they don't know, they learn to not trust that you're giving them the right information, that you're hiding things. And so just get out ahead of them. This one took me forever to learn. Much to my own detriment, I'll be honest. But authoritarian leaders love to know what's going on. So if you can give them regular updates even before they ask, that puts you in more of like a trusted kind of colleague position, because they don't have to ask what's going on. They already know because you've given them the update already. And again, this is probably in writing so that you can protect yourself. But if you just set a reminder on your phone, remind yourself to write an email with an update about whatever projects you're working on, maybe once a week if they want that, or if more often if you feel it's necessary. Every person and every leader is different, but whatever update schedule that leader is the most comfortable with, figure out where that is and then give them updates slightly before that, right? It is a silly thing. It takes a few minutes. It might feel like extra work, but it is well worth it because it protects you and then also gets on their good side. Not that I'm trying to, play politics here necessarily, but it's easier to get along with an authoritarian leader if you can, and if they feel like you're giving them the information they need, that they're not ever caught off guard because of your actions or your withholding of information, then you will be more trusted, right? You'll be on the good side, and you'll at least not be on their bad side. So keeping them up to date on a regular basis makes them feel a little bit more secure, lessens their tendency if they want to go a little micromanagey on you and like really want you to account for every moment of your day. They'll be less likely to want to do that because you've already given them updates, you're being transparent about what you're up to, how you're spending your time, where you're at with these projects. So if somebody asks them, they will know what's going on, because there's nothing an authoritarian leader hates more than being asked something from like their boss and them not having the answers and not knowing where to find those answers. So if you can provide them before they're ever asked about where we are in the project or what is so-and-so up to, if they already know, they can just give that information. It makes them look like a solid leader doing the right thing, and everyone moves on. Do not make it your mission to highlight how bad of a leader you have if you've got an authoritarian leader. It is frustrating, and I know it would be so satisfying if they were kind of taken out of power, right? Their worst fear, honestly. However, it's not worth your mental labor to make that happen. And also it puts yourself in danger, right? Not like physical danger, but like danger of like losing your job or having opportunities missed, that kind of thing. Like, you don't want that. Like, just do what you can to get by, because that authoritarian leader is more than likely going to burn out at some point, because they're going to make mistakes. They do make a lot of mistakes. They let their fear overtake them, and they don't generally make it that high in most cases. So, especially in nonprofits, a lot of the time, that's not the type of leader that you want high up in a nonprofit, because nonprofits can't survive it. So, more than likely, an authoritarian leader or somebody who depends on authoritarian style a lot is going to burn themselves out, because at some point somebody's going to see all those weaknesses of them not thinking things through, not considering consequences, causing a toxic work environment, basically. And that will take care of itself. I've seen it happen, and I wish I had let the whole situation run its course, I guess, rather than me kind of investing all this mental preparation and mental load into this situation where I was trying to honestly showcase how bad my authoritarian leader was. I put a lot of effort into that, and I shouldn't have, because it just wore me out. And things ended up, like, once I kind of gave up, things sorted themselves out naturally. So learn from my mistakes and just go ahead and protect yourself. Go along with it as best you can. Try not to devote too much thought to the authoritarian leader style, why they're doing what they're doing, and how angry it makes you. Just release your anger on that. Give yourself some space to breathe, and just do what you can to navigate around that leader and make them happy enough that you're not missing opportunities because they're mad. It's just easier to deal with that way. I wish I would have learned that a lot sooner, but I didn't. So learn from my mistakes. And if you find an authoritarian leader that you are not jiving with, just do your best to document the things that you need to document, all those conversations about what you're going to be doing with your time as a direct report to an authoritarian leader. And then, try to make sure that they look good where you can, where it makes sense. Frame things so that they kind of come up with these ideas themselves. They're much more likely to adopt them, and you ultimately get what you want, right? And then make sure that you are giving them more information than maybe they need every day. It's a little more work that way than dealing with other types of leaders, but in the end, you will survive and it'll be okay. Hopefully the next leader is going to be a little bit more flexible with their leadership style. If you have any questions about that or any other leadership or management topics or zoo and aquarium stuff in general, you can write it up in an email, send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me at patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.